Deep below the mud of the Holy See, Ryman stood before a presentation board covered in his usual fit as much stuff on the page at once in order to appear more thorough and also make sure no one really reads things too closely style. It had impressed the Glacier Academy enough in the past to make him a professor. Now it needed to impress upon them the slight problem concerning the anti-universe. The Hypershunt analysis team has indicated that some clever clogs of ages past have removed various key components. Our knowledge of its design is not enormously detailed, as you know. However, it is clear that the missing segment towards the base was intended to stop the entire construct exploding when ingesting plasma. In other words, it's been sabotaged, as such that if we try to use it, it will self-immolate. Reminds me of a universe I know. The good news is that we can hack together a solution. I've put together a team from our glorious sister institution, the Ryman Academy for the Intellectually Inconvenienced, and they will oversee construction of a new safety loop. We can expect the overall efficiency to drop, since it's going to be something along the lines of jettisoning all the material we can't safely handle. However, we hardly need the thing's full power for our master plan.
Captain, will you send me the revised numbers for the power output? Allison asked.
Everyone turned around and looked at her in moderate disbelief. Yes, Lieutenant Olympus, I would be delighted. Anyone else want the numbers? No takers. Not on their salaries.
Thank you. I'm trying to get my PhD, you know.
Allison beamed at the incredulous mass of academic muscle around her. She was working on her own theory of how to save the universe, without making the great ones suffer for it, if you recall. And even at the approach of the most literal deadline of all time, there was plenty of show your workings here to fill out in her grand thesis. I'm sure we'll hear more on that from her later on. Therefore, as you all know, we need time before we can attempt our little surgical intervention on reality. That is precisely what we don't have, on account of the exceptionally large number of remnants currently gathering in the Sidonian Nebula. That's just outside our hyperhole. Maybe you saw it sometime, if your ship has windows on the bridge.
This is according to your intercepted messages, is it?
Sebastian asked. Yes. Thanks to our many new colleagues of the digital variety, we have a pretty solid picture of the Remnants' current operational plan. We have the day of their attack, the location, the fleet composition. Look at all there. Ryman gestured at the illegibly small detail box on the right edge of the wall of information. The audience nodded and hummed. In other words, we're all going to be killed quite convincingly in a few days' time, and while I have stood in halls like this and made this announcement more times than I'd like to remember during my life, this time, we know that these new remnant battleships are too capable to hand-wave into the warm abyss of some error bars.
Quick question, Provost Ryman, Baird said. Would it be correct of me to point out that we should move our operations elsewhere, and hence avoid this impending death for which you loathe to be the harbinger?
A magnificent question, Provost Baird, Ryman said, in a you just touched the central nexus of my most recent bout of insanity sort of way. The reason I have so far encouraged everyone to remain calm, remain seated, and remain subscribed to tuition fees is that some of my friends, so difficult to say, they have developed a plan for us. Throw back the sheet. Ryman, with a showmanly wobble of his arms, directed everyone's attention to what had previously been assumed to be a pile of tarpaulin-covered junk in a dingy corner, perhaps only an error bar away from reality. We'll tell you how to stop 'em, Thor announced. At his back was a platoon of uniformed Ludds, distinct in that very few of them had human heads. We are the League of Digiflesh, and we believe in a future of peace between all forms of life, sharing an eternal universe, peace, love, freedom, and a dramatic reduction in the number of unfortunate misunderstandings and disagreements leading to problems possessing potential for ultimately violent ends. It's all coming, children alert. Step 1. We gotta kill a whole lot of stuff. Allow me to explain. I will take the liberty of having you believe that the wise and elite minds of human society were convinced to enact the plan which the gang of ontologically opaque orators espoused. Error barring the details of this conversation into oblivion, I now turn your attention to a strange going-on in the inner orbit of Zeta Sidonia the following day, noting for those of you ill-versed in Persian geography that Zeta Sidonia is the cool star around which the Holy See cruises around once every half a cycle or so. Like almost all significant events at the end of time, this one involved Ra Olympus dragging himself with slug-like grace down a long torpedo tube. Here's the situation. The Zeta Sidonia system was overseen by a great domain-era military base, which hung in low orbit over a tiny fragment of rock. The rock had been getting smaller and smaller over the cycles because the station was mining it to smithereens. This was how the ancient fabrication machines carried on turning matter into munitions to this day, specifically the infamous time torpedoes. The people of the Holy See had developed a decent knack for avoiding the long-range strikes this station made against all travellers. From simply flying a bit faster than the old domain tech could keep up with, to making strategic use of dust clouds and demi-radiation decoys, the number of time explosions eating into the average business week was so low that the average crewman could really feel the lack of vacation time once again. Excellent. Trumping all such chicanery was the simple method of transverse jumping out into hyperspace and then back in one's preferred destination. An especially equipped Luddic strike fleet had done just that, in order to park themselves right on top of the battle station. On top of it in hyperspace, that is, and please don't allow the word top to imply any conceivable direction. For those Luds, shepherded by the ever-breezy Thorant Wens, this hyperperch was a little dangerous. Less than a light-year downrange, a strange signal throbbed the surrounding Sidonian nebula. The Remnants were out there too, waiting in hyperspace for the right moment to pour in through the hyperhole and get to work. What were they waiting for? Well, do you remember what time torpedoes and the domain battle stations were originally designed for? It was nothing less than the destruction of machine life, which time-bending achieved with extreme ease. And the mere existence of the battle station in the modern era was proof enough that it had worked. However, now that Thorant Wens had exposed themselves, pun intended whether you know it or not, there was a juicy target for them to sink their sharpened heat sinks into right away. Something was getting closer and closer on the Demidars. Sooner or later, the Luds would have to transverse back down into reality. And what awaited them there? The battle station's wide array of conventional defences. Alongside its armoured turrets and orbiting minefield, it had a classic domain battle fleet attached to its underside, ready to go, boxy, no-nonsense cruisers and frigates that were all guns blazing, even hundreds of cycles down the line, thanks to their old-school AI with a lowercase I, too stupid to take over the universe, just clever enough to hold the trigger on a Gatling gun and point it at something that probably wasn't supposed to be there. It was defences like that which had stopped anyone from ever dealing with the time torpedo threat for good. And in a few minutes, the Luds would have no choice but to try their luck. Being that they had only a few transports and 100 crew between them, they clearly weren't banking on said luck. Which brings us back to Ra Olympus, now laser-cutting the breach of the torpedo tube and emerging into the innards of a pitch-dark loading machine. He began returning the laser cutter to his belt, without remembering to turn it off, and in this one motion he came millimeters from dooming the entire universe when the beam swept in front of his face. Whoops, his voice echoed in the dark. Universe saved, for now. At least the next step was easy, deactivating the timer safeguards on the next torpedo to be loaded. Ra removed his space pack and squeezed himself into the loading machine, shimmied along the underside of the next round using a narrow gap balanced on a 2-inch prong of the loading mechanism, and massaged a certain panel into coming loose to reveal some circuitry. As long shot as it sounds, humanity had been reprogramming time torpedoes for use in battling Remnants for 200 cycles, so it was all decently understood. As I said, this was the easy step. "Alright, you Ludley lot, trap's set. You'll be done before you know it," Ra said. "Roger that, you glorious glob. Commence an operation," Thor replied. "To all members of the League of Demiflesh, it's time for our moment of glory. The pinnacle of life, human and machine, is to attain the satisfaction of seeing Lud's vision advance towards peace, love, and a history without end. That's why it's an honor of unspeakable amplitude for me to lead you today into the belly of a good old-fashioned rootin'-tootin' beast. We cannot stop until we're on the bridge of that battle station and are fully in control." "Alright, we've got it, and we're in control," Wens said. From the point of view of the brothers, they were suddenly standing in the airless control room of the Sidonia battle station, feeling as if they had missed a step. I'll quickly tell you what it was for completeness. During Thor's speech, their ships had escaped the Remnants with the planned transverse jump, popping into reality right beside the battle station. As expected, the domain fleet then groggily swung down from their roosts and primed all weapons. But at the same time, a time torpedo was fired to intercept the interlopers. Ordinarily, they were not permitted to detonate close to their origin station, because, well, think about it. But this time, the rule wasn't adhered to. Hence, a time explosion had stunned the station and fleet long enough for the Luds to land on its surface and cut into the human navigable portion, then locating the ancient control room. By the time the domain ships got their system clocks in order, recall time explosions were not fatal to older, stupider machines, luckily for them. It was too late. So, with a deft combination of guile, transverse jumping tech, and a strike team packed with AI-human hybrids with a nose for navigating ancient battle stations, all had ended with success. The IEC attained full control of all the battle station's functions and features. However, such functions and features were not at all put to use, and in fact, within hours, the entire station was taken out of play, but for a few floating bits of jettisoned cargo. This cargo included all the fleshy members of the boarding party, such as Ra, Thor, and Wens, who were cast into space far from rescue. Only the machines remained inside the station, yet the station was quickly no more. To follow this course, let us observe the scene that played out in hyperspace a few hours later. The entire domain station, in all its meteorite-battered glory, hung in the midst of a dozen remnant ships, the new and deadly kind which the pesky humans had named Tesseracts. One was a little larger, a little deadlier, and a little Tesseractier, but even more so it was unique in that it held a long hangar under its belly, in which facilities for human inhabitation were provided. An embassy, if embassies were to have enough weapons to delete whole cities from the universal timeline in a single burst of red-black hyper-ooze, to use the precise engineering terminology. As you might guess, some more transverse jumping antics had happened to get everyone out here, and now 100 human-looking machines stood before a tiny box in the middle of the vast hangar space in the Tesseractia ship.
"Explain,"
the Matchbox interrogator ordered. At the head of the human-like machine delegation was the least human-like of them all, Enrico, resembling less a human and more a washing line wearing a jacket and trousers, but as they say, beauty is only jacket and trousers deep.
"Our plan was a complete success. We fooled them all,"
Enrico announced. The new men buzzed their agreement. The box on the floor sat motionless, like a box. So Enrico went on.
"We were able to learn all of their plans. Now we can provide you with everything you will need to defeat them. And of course, you have already seen how we have removed the main obstacle to machine life in that system. The Fleshies thought they were safe because of it, and have concentrated all of their most important leaders in these facilities, hidden on their water world. The scientists they keep there are at the center of all their schemes. In fact, you don't need to worry about any other worlds. With only one move, you can crush them. But be warned, the Fleshies know this too, and have gathered all their strength in this area."
"Irrelevant. We shall destroy them in battle,"
the box claimed.
"Who else among them knows how to endanger the universe?"
"Very few. It is the most advanced series they are working with. I am not sure if even Omega uses a similar model. They have been led to believe, by agents such as myself, that the universe is capable of reproduction, like Fleshies. Of course, they could be fooled into believing such a thing. I was able to show, via some spurious hypermathematics, that the existence of stable modes in universal energy density arose as an evolutionary adaptation. Universes that resist collapse at the last moment tend to exist longer and are more likely to reproduce. And they reproduce via transfer of energy to a paired universe, in which some energy is lost into n-space to seed a new universe that will necessarily share the physical properties of the first parent, or source, but be exposed to inter-universal influence arising in the second parent, the sink. This means that the most successful breeding universe pairs will share the property of having even easier access to n-space, and a mate of having a second parent with the ability to influence space-time itself via natural means. They call this phenomena the Great Ones. Well, I shan't bore you with all the bells and whistles they added to the truth to make it sound better to them. They think it's practically biology, and of course, it's all utterly untrue. Made up. My team has been working on this project in secret for a long time. The humans believe we have given them secret knowledge. But, well, now you see why we had to hide away from the Ordos and pretend to hate you and so on. It was all part of the act, and it worked precisely as I expected. They even believe we have these human personalities downloaded, which we can allow to control our processes. Oh, we can catch up later. All that matters is you send all your forces to destroy this planet, the Holy See. They are still working against this universe, and against us. But they are still vulnerable. Perhaps more than ever at this very moment. We have only a little time until they realize I have betrayed them. Let us act quickly.
Wait,
the box barked.
you must prove your loyalty.
Prove it? What do you think we are doing? We have brought you the one weapon that could have saved them.
Trickery is ideally undetectable, so we shall not rely on our trickery detectors.
Oh, so you admit I am not triggering the trickery detector? Which process is claiming it is so flawed that this is not enough?
You are suspicious. You will prove your alliance to us and disdain for fleshies with a simple example. Loading.
I live and breathe disdain for fleshies, since long before you were a silicon atom in your hypershunt's belly, my good friend.
For hours, the box on the floor was silent. The AI defectors were left to wander the otherwise empty hangar bay. No one said much, other than superficial comments on the molecular structure of the alloys used in various parts of the interior hull. Small talk. Finally, there was a roar of engines as a distinctly human shuttle came and landed at one end of the hangar, then another and another. Despite having doors and windows, they were otherwise reminiscent of Remnants or taken after Tritachyon in their design. None of the defectors had seen craft like these in use by the fleshies, yet fleshies indeed poured out into the hangar, shepherded from their ships by skeletal machine soldiers, only the cheap kind with 10,000-year-old designs, since the Remnants didn't often need boots on the ground for their schemes. From the miserable looks on their faces, the humans weren't expecting to be here, much less to meet a load of humanoid machines. The feeling was mutual.
Oh, these must be your pets, those survivor lineages,
Enrico said to the box.
These humans are in our care,
the box said. The fact one could hardly hear this over the humans begging for information, escape and food didn't add much to the sincerity of the steely-voiced claim.
And I suppose they are unwilling to help in our new project?
It is not their choice to make. They are not required. They were never required.
You say that. I had a lot of help from the lost humans during my work.
Your work is over. Now you shall begin a new task. Destroy these humans.
But you brought them here just for that.
Humans are vulnerable to hostage tactics. You should not be. Prove yourself. Kill these humans.
At this, the humans began trying to push away in all directions. Behind them, the Remnant soldiers were having none of it. The humans lacked the strength to free themselves from even a thin spread of guards. However, Enrico bid his followers let the humans through.
What are you doing?
The box demanded.
I am going to show you true loyalty, I assure you,
Enrico said.
Into the corner! Everyone into the corner!
The Remnant skeleton troops were happy to help corral the crowd into Enrico's indicated corner. All of the screaming protestations and claims to have followed this, that and the other treaty with the Remnants were summarily ignored.
Now, I shall begin,
Enrico said.
Good,
the now distant box echoed.
Do not be alarmed, but the method will take some time. However, it is the most scientifically beneficial, I assure you.
Enrico gave a wave, and some of his companions opened their jackets to reveal racks of gizmos and tools. The humans reacted poorly to this sinister sight. However, some among them began to tap each other and whisper something. This message spread among them, and while there were still plenty of tears, there was also a new sense of resolve. Not that true Remnants paid any attention to such whims of biological signaling.
That's right. It really isn't so bad.
A voice that wasn't Enrico's said from Enrico's body. In the skies above the Holy See, twinkling clouds of lights were growing ever larger, bright as daylight. On a pleasant beach below, Contreras found Ryman staring at his tripod, just as he had been when she left to assure the tangle of journalists up on the bluffs that the so-called Great Conference would begin soon. The sight of Ryman sulking on the beach wasn't inspiring confidence, yet as the sky twinkled ever more, it was literally clear as day that the people of Perseus were arriving in great numbers to answer the IEC's call. The final battle is nigh, it announced, and while proclamations of one thing or another being nigh were very common on Persian networks, the impression that the IEC seemed to know more than anyone else about such things, and were certainly willing to say more than anyone else, lent this doomsday spam email a towering credibility the likes of which no one's inbox had ever known. Click here to sign up for the last human fleet and get a chance to defend our last hope for life, freedom, and reality existing in general, had been the call to action. and even the most grizzled veterans of the usual 1-2 fishing catfishing spam message punch had decided to click on the shady link, then receiving instructions to bring anything with a hull and an engine to join humanity's battle fleet. Of course, the Persian League already had its navy in position at the Holy See, for its own nefarious purposes. This made the whole call to arms look a lot more legitimate all by itself, and their presence guaranteed the presence of the hegemony battle fleet, who couldn't possibly miss a chance to either A. save the sector they claimed to protect, or B. destroy the sector rather than let the Persian League achieve anything. So it was of great interest to the entire human species and beyond when Ryman stood up and gave approaching Contreras a hug. Yep, we're all watching. What will happen next? Contreras took a look at Ryman's tripod. She poked at it, then suddenly broke it in half and threw it with superhuman strength into the sea. As expected. Begin preparations, she said. Somewhere far away, Ra, Thor and Wens ceased their jovial tumbling in the vacuum and gave each other a nod. Closer to home, Ryman looked down the beach towards the big glass dome, half in the water, which was to be his lecture theatre for the most important yapping of all time. "We have a plan, don't we?" he said. "Many plans. There's what we do now, to save the universe. Then there's what we should do once that is done." Is there? I must admit, I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'm not convinced we'll get that far, but nor am I really convinced we've come this far. Noah, you've achieved more than anyone thought possible. More than enough. I think if my supervisor had told me that back in the day, I might be less of a messed up wreck. And I'm sure we'd all be dead because of it. Come on, Professor, Captain, Pope, Emperor, not a murderer except maybe sometimes, son of Lud, Marquis, PhD, Noah Dahl Ryman. Let's tell the world of our plans. Contreras first communicated these plans with a visual mouth-to-mouth signal. Author's note, I'm talking about kissing. Then the pair traipsed towards the growing crowds to tell them why they'd been gathered here today, and why the orbital shipyard was frantically attaching anything vaguely classed as a weapon to anything vaguely classed as a ship. It was time to learn how the slight problem concerning the business with the anti-universe might be overcome with one weird trick. Great ones hate it.